Welcome back to the channel, everybody. As you progress through your teens and your 20s, there's going to be a lot of things that happen in life that no one really took the time to actually explain to you. So in today's video, we're going to cover the tier list of things that no one tells you in your 20s. So let's go ahead, let's get into the video. First up on the list here is that your friend group will shrink. And when you're younger, especially in middle school and high school, you're surrounded by people all the time. And it's easy to think that those friendships will stay exactly the same forever and nothing's going to harm them. But then unfortunately, life happens. People are going to move away. They're going to get married or have kids. A lot of people get busy with their careers and just their priorities change. And before you know it, those group chats that used to be super active, or the Discord servers, or, the Xbox Live parties, they're completely silent because just no one has the time to actually get on it. And organically, those friendships are going to start to fade. Your friend group getting smaller isn't necessarily a bad thing. In a lot of cases, it's completely normal. What usually happens is that you end up trading quantity for quality. So instead of having, 20 friends that you occasionally talk to, you end up having like a handful of friends, maybe 2 to 3 friends, and no one really tells you this when you're younger. And a lot of people think like it'll never happen to their friend group. Like a lot of people think like, oh, we're solid, this is never going to happen, until it actually happens. And most of the times, it's not something you did wrong, it's just a part of growing up. So when it comes to your friend group shrinking, this is something that you're going to eventually learn. Next up is the harsh truth that no one is coming to save you. And at some point, a lot of us are going to realize that no one is coming to fix our finances. No one's coming to hand us our, dream career on a platter. No one's going to help you get in shape. You're going to have to do it your own. They're not going to make you successful. They're not going to solve problems for you. Not your parents, not your boss, not the government. And that hits a lot of people really hard at first. Like I remember the first time I got this realization is when I moved out on my own for the first time. Because at some point you have to stop waiting for someone else to change your life, right? Like you have to take ownership of it. You have to stop making excuses. You have to stop blaming the circumstances and third-party forces around you. And you just have to stop waiting for all these, random perfect opportunities to happen, right? You have to do stuff on your own and figure it out. And from what I've noticed, the people who make a lot of progress are the ones who usually decide that they're responsible for the outcome of their lives, even when the situation they're in maybe isn't necessarily entirely their fault. And it's no secret by now that life isn't always fair, and some people absolutely start with advantages, but at the end of the day, you're the one who has to live your own life, and no one is going to care about your future more than you do because you're living in it. So this is easily a hard truth that you will learn at some point in your 20s. Next up is your life is the result of your actions. And this is another one that a lot of people just don't want to hear, because a lot of people will spend years blaming their jobs or their parents or the economy they live in because their life isn't exactly where they want it to be at. And to be fair, some people absolutely have harder circumstances than others. But once again, as I just mentioned, at some point you have to look at the common denominator in your life, and that's you. Your current situation is largely the result of the decisions that you have made, the habits that you have built, and the actions that you have taken over time. And no one likes hearing this stuff because it means that they have to take full responsibility for their lives. But at the same time, I also find this very empowering, because if your actions helped create your current situation, then your actions can also help you to change it if you're not happy with it. So most people want a different life, but very few people are actually willing to consistently make different decisions to actually get them there. So this is another one of those just hard truths that you will at some point learn in your 20s. Next up is that making more money does not solve your problems. And this one is a huge surprise for people, because when you're younger, it's easy to think that all of your problems would just instantly magically disappear if you just made more, right? Like a lot of people tell themselves, if I could just get to $80,000 a year, or if I could get that 6-figure job, or if I could get that new job promotion, and don't get me wrong, more money and more income absolutely helps. It can reduce stress, and it can just make life easier in a lot of different ways. But money alone does not automatically fix bad habits. If you're bad with money at $50,000 a year, more than likely, you're going to be bad with money at $100,000 a year. And if you're unhappy, or you're unmotivated, or you're unhealthy, or you lack direction, a bigger paycheck is not going to solve any of those things. And this is one of those things that you'll eventually learn in life, but just you always have to keep this in the back of your mind, because more money is not going to solve your problems. Next up is your parents are figuring life out too. And when you're a kid, your parents are your superheroes for most people, right? It seems like they have everything figured out. They make the decisions, they have all the answers. Then you get older and you kind of realize that it's their first time on the earth too. Like they've never been that age before. They've never dealt with the exact same situation that you might be dealing with or they're dealing with. And they're learning and making mistakes just like you are. And I think this is a really important realization because a lot of people spend their 20s either putting their parents on this pedestal or blaming their parents for absolutely everything that's going wrong in their life. And I get it. Like a lot of people are in terrible situations because of their parents and really resent them for that. And the older you get, you kind of realize that most adults are kind of just doing the best they can with the information they have. So I think overall, this is just one of those common surprises where, cut your parents some slack if you're a little hard on them. They're figuring life out too. Next up is that time moves fast. And this is one that honestly, no one can prepare you for this. You're going to hear this from every single person on the internet or in your family or your friends. Like when you're younger, years feel like they take forever. I don't know about you guys, but high school felt like it was 10 years long for me. But then you get to this point in your 20s. For me, it was around like 23 years old where suddenly the years just fly by. Like 1 minute you're 23 thinking about how you have all the time in the world. The next minute you're like me, you're 26 and you're wondering where the last 3 years went. And this is why your 20s matter so much, not because you need to have everything figured out, but because those decisions you make now can compound a lot faster than you realize. And I know sometimes it might feel like time is incredibly slow on a day-to-day basis, but when you get to a certain point in your 20s, it is going to be so fast year to year, and you kind of just have to hang on for the ride. So this is one of those kind of classic hard truths that you will learn at some point in your 20s. Next up is that most people care far less about you than you actually think. And I know this sounds like, okay, like that's kind of harsh, but in my opinion, this is probably one of the most freeing things that you can actually learn because when you're younger, it's easy to think that everyone is watching you. So you think people, are judging what you're wearing or they're judging what you posted or what you're doing with your life. And the reality is most people are way too busy thinking about themselves to spend any time thinking about you, what you dress like, what car you drive, what house you own, anything like that. And once you realize that, you become a lot more willing to actually live life and act in the way you'd actually want to. Because even if someone does notice it and wants to judge you, they're gonna forget about it tomorrow, and who cares what their opinion is if I'm being honest. And I personally know a lot of people who have held themselves back for years because they're worried about what everyone else thinks about them. Meanwhile, all those people are way too worried about themselves to actually care about other people. I think this is one that no one mentions enough, especially in the day and age of like social media. Next up is that no one knows what they're doing at first. And when you're younger, it's really easy to look at successful people and just assume that they had this master plan from the get-go. You see business owners or like, my example where I work at a corporate environment, you see kind of the executives and you're like, man, these people, man, they must know everything. And most of the times they didn't, nor do they even know a lot now, right? They were confused just like we were. They made a handful of mistakes and they probably failed a whole bunch. Like no one starts knowing all the answers. The people who get ahead are usually the ones who are willing to take the jump, look unexperienced for a while so they can eventually become experienced because they're going to learn through their mistakes. You can read all the books in the world, you can watch all the financial YouTube videos in the world, but at some point you're going to actually have to start investing your money to actually move the needle forward. So I think this one is a common surprise for a lot of people in their 20s. Next up is that it's all about who you know. And growing up, right, you're told from a lot of different people that you need to work hard, keep your head down, do good work, everything is going to take care of itself. And then you get into the real world and you realize that relationships matter a lot, like almost more than the skills you have, probably 90% of the times. A huge amount of opportunities come through people you know and not actual job applications. Now, that doesn't mean that your resume doesn't matter or your skills don't matter. They absolutely do, right? Like if you can't perform at least 50% of the job, eventually people are going to figure that out. But I've found that a lot of people focus 100% on building skills and 0% on actually building relationships with people around them. So what you need to do is you need to combine both, right? You need to become valuable, but also meet people, build those relationships, stay in touch with those people, and be someone that others want to help out. I think no one mentions this enough. This is something you really need to focus on as you progress through your 20s. Next up is that you don't need everything figured out by 25. And I think social media has made this one just way worse. Like you go online and it feels like every single person who's younger than you has the perfect career, the perfect relationship, the perfect finances, all the cars you want, the biggest house in the world. Meanwhile, you're sitting there watching this on your phone, feeling extremely behind. So I would say the bigger takeaway here is it's okay to not have anything figured out by the age of 25, but you don't want to sit there doing nothing because you're afraid of making the wrong choice. Because typically what can happen is people can spend years kind of like stressing about finding the perfect path when they would have just been better off by simply picking a direction and just getting started, even if it was going to lead to failure. So I think this is one that no one mentions this enough. This needs to be more of a thing where people just need to realize that you don't need everything figured out by 25. Next up is one none of us want to admit, but success rarely happens overnight. This is one that I still want to disagree with because I want to tell myself that I can be successful tomorrow. When you look at successful people, it often seems like they kind of came out of nowhere. Like one day, no one knew who they were, and the next day they're extremely successful, they're wealthy, and they're in like the, running the best business you could think of. Most success stories, in my opinion, on social media are kind of machined to look like they came overnight when no one really talked about like the 5 to 10 years that they actually had to struggle to get there. And I think this is why so many people quit too early, because they'll compare their first like 6 months to someone else's 10th year and then convince themselves that they're not making any progress. Most of the big results you'll see in life and the biggest payoffs come from a lot of small actions repeated for a very long time. And it takes years of consistency for that to finally become kind of visible to everyone else around you. So I think this is one that you'll kind of eventually learn as you progress through your 20s. Next up is being busy and being productive are different things. And when you're in your 20s, it's very easy to confuse some type of movement with progress, right? Like, for example, you could answer emails, you could attend meetings, you could scroll LinkedIn, but at the end of the week, nothing actually changed for your career. So for example, I've seen people who work 12-hour shifts and they don't really get much done. I've also met people who work kind of like a focused few hours every single day on the right things, and they make massive progress. The hard part is actually sticking through and working through the productivity when you get unmotivated to do so. Because to be productive, you have to do the important things that matter the most. And that's typically the things we avoid or procrastinate doing because that requires the most focus and work from us. So I think this is a common surprise for a lot of people in their 20s, is differentiating being busy and actually being productive. Next up is that your career is rarely a straight line. And when you're younger, it's easy to think of careers and they kind of work like a ladder. So like you get a job, you get promoted again, you get promoted again. You just kind of keep moving up forever until at some point you're content. Because some people will switch industries or they'll take a step backward to actually move forward in a different respect. Some people might unfortunately get laid off. They might turn down a promotion. And in my opinion, what doesn't get talked about enough is that this is completely normal. A lot of people will panic the first time their career doesn't go according to plan. So for a lot of people, I think this is a common surprise as well, because they don't realize that that's how career works. Careers rarely work in a straight line. Next up is that job hopping will often pay more than loyalty to a company. And growing up, a lot of us are kind of told that if you work hard and you stay loyal to one company, that company will take care of you. And sometimes that is true, and it definitely used to be true in the past. Typically, companies nowadays are not loyal to you like they were in the past. And nowadays, companies often have bigger budgets to hire talent than they do to actually retain it. So that's why you'll see someone who's getting, a 3% annual raise when then a new hire comes along and they're making 20% more. Now, I'm not saying that you should, switch jobs every 6 months chasing a paycheck. That's not the lesson. The lesson is that loyalty should be earned, right? If you're learning and you're growing and you're being treated well, then obviously staying with this company can make a lot of sense. But if you've been in the same role for years and you kind of feel stuck and your pay's not going up and there are better opportunities available and those opportunities will lead to a 10, 20, 30% pay raise, then you absolutely at that point need to take the leap of faith. So I think this is one that you'll learn eventually, that loyalty in the workplace really does not pay off nowadays. Next up is a quote from Tony Robbins where he says, "People overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade." Because most people get this motivational kick every once in a while that they're going to completely transform their life in the next 12 months. And this can be, getting in shape, doubling their income, starting a business, becoming an expert at building wealth, or just whatever it might be. And then that year goes by and they get frustrated because they either gave up halfway along the way or they didn't get the results they wanted. But the part that ties into this quote is that if you give that same person 10 years of consistent effort, the results can be unbelievable. A decade is enough time to completely change your finances, completely change your health, build a successful career or business, and just build meaningful relationships. The problem is that most people quit because they're measuring their progress on a 1-year timeline instead of a 10-year timeline. So I think this is one that's a hard truth for people in their 20s, because a lot of people don't give themselves enough time and growth to actually see what they can achieve, and they just give up after 3 months when they haven't seen the progress they wanted to. Next is that motivation is unreliable. And, this is one that we all struggle with because in the moment when you're motivated, it feels amazing. Like you'll go run, you'll watch David Goggins and you'll go run a mile with like a weighted jacket. And then 2 weeks later, you haven't done anything, you haven't been consistent, you haven't done it at all, and you don't feel like doing it anymore. And that's why you can't build any type of personal foundation off of motivation, right? It comes and goes way too easily. The people who actually make progress in their lives aren't usually motivated every single day because it's honestly impossible to be that motivated. They typically just build, systems and habits like consistency and discipline, and that really keeps them in the routine of doing things even when they don't feel like it. Because I'm sure we've all been there, but if you're only working out and saving money and studying when you're motivated, you're going to be inconsistent forever. So I think this is something that you'll eventually learn at some point in your 20s. Next is that who you marry is the most important decision you will ever make in your entire life. The person that you choose to spend your life with will have a bigger impact on your finances, your happiness, your stress levels, and your future more than anything else combined. So think about it this way. If one person is a spender and the other is a saver, that's going to create financial friction. If one person wants kids and the other doesn't, that's going to create more friction. If your values, beliefs, goals, religion, politics, or just vision for the future are completely different from your partner, eventually those differences are going to show up. So this is one of those ones that is just a hard truth. Everyone in their 20s needs to realize that before anything, the person you spend your life with will be the most important decision you ever make. And lastly, on the list here is that your health compounds just like money. The workouts you do today will not change your life today. The healthy meal that you eat does not change your life today. Getting one good night of sleep today does not change your life. But if you stack those habits for 5, 10, 20 years, the difference is going to become huge. But also it works in reverse. Skipping the gym probably doesn't matter today. Eating McDonald's today probably doesn't matter. Staying up late, pulling an all-nighter probably doesn't matter today. If you do that for the next 5, 10, 20 years, it can have significant negative impacts on your health. Just like your finances, your health typically isn't determined by one decision. It's just determined by thousands of those little small decisions that get repeated over a very long period of time. And just like your finances, the earlier you can start caring about your health, the easier it's going to actually become. So this is something, in my opinion, that everyone in their 20s will learn eventually to start really taking your health seriously. So that is the tier list for things in your 20s that no one tells you. Now let me know in the comments down below what caught you off guard as you've entered and progressed through your 20s, the things that no one told you that you wish someone told you. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.